All right, everybody, back with another one. Today we're going to take a look at the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. There's a lot of, people online that are very disappointed in the Trump administration for not releasing the Jeffrey Epstein stuff at this time. And then also a lot of people are getting even more frustrated with the administration as a whole, including Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, Cash Patel, Diane Bongino, and others about how they're handling this Jeffrey Epstein situation. And if you haven't seen a lot of this stuff already, which I'm sure most of you probably have, there's been a lot of clips of Cash Patel, Pam Bondi, and Dan Bongino being caught in situations where they have said one thing in the past about the Epstein situation and then have done a complete 180 and are saying the opposite now, saying that the, their investigation has concluded that there's been no foul play with Jeffrey Epstein's death. He committed suicide, and that there's no evidence of Jeffrey Epstein having or running a sex trafficking ring and having high profile politicians, celebrity, other clients that were engaging in illegal activities of a sexual nature with minors, especially not on the Jeffrey Epstein, secret island. And they're basically walking back everything that they've said in the past. The public is definitely getting more and more frustrated, especially the MAGA base, with number one, how they're handling the situation, and number two, that they're blatantly lying to the public and covering up this whole case. They released the JFK stuff. They still have yet to release the RFK stuff, the MLK stuff, and a whole bunch of other, secret operations that the government was running, or interesting and unusual deaths that occurred that were assassinations that people have felt were conspiracies for a long time, and possibly even the United States government was involved. And so we're at a point where the people are just so frustrated with being lied to, not being told the truth. And a part of me understands that because we as the people do have the right to know what's going on in our country, especially because we, the people, are the government. And we're supposed to be the end result of the government. We're supposed to oversee the government to make sure that they're governing in a manner that is appropriate and in a way that represents our wishes in alignment with God, so that they're running the country the correct way. They're continuing to uphold our rights. They're continuing to, not be corrupt and evil and do shady things. And so the people are frustrated, rightfully so, because we're being lied to. And a part of me understands that because we do have a right to know most things. But then a part of me also understands that not everything can be told to the public, because as we're watching, other countries are watching too. And they're going to get that information as well. And it's going to give them the ability to fill in the blanks with some of their intel that they will now be able to get a better idea as to how the United States government works and the type of, secret shady things or secret programs that they run. And also it could make them understand some of the stuff that our government has done to their countries that now they want to retaliate on us about. So there's a lot there, but also a part of me also understands that the public is not always ready for some of the real truth that goes on and accepting it. And also, some of those people are still alive and they don't want that information getting out because it will be the end of them. I mean, literally the end of them. They will either go to prison for life, or they will be killed, or they will be executed through the judicial system with the penalty being death. So they look at it as a last resort. Absolutely no way, shape, or form can this information get out because it will be the end of my life. And those people are going to fight till their death to stop the information from coming out. It's the people's job to keep pushing to get the information out, but there may be a possibility that we don't receive this information until the people involved are long gone. And then the generations of the future find out and they don't care anymore because it didn't affect them. It wasn't part of their lifetime. So there's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot going on here specifically. But then there's also an element where the people are not mentally ready for some of this information, because look at the way they conduct themselves in society. Look at the way that people are very immature today. They used to be, the government didn't baby the people so much in the past because the people were very independent. And even if the government offered them mechanisms to be babied and have the government be their parent. They rejected it wholeheartedly because they knew they wanted independence and freedom, and that anybody who relies on the government and the media and all these different, major things to sort of tell them how to think, tell them what to do, and control their lives, it would make them weak. And they knew that back then. So they were always independent and would never voluntarily take help from the government or have the government involved in their life in any capacity if they could help it. But the people today are very weak. Not everybody, but there is a good portion of the population that is, and relies on the government to take care of them cradle to grave, and relies on the media to tell them everything that they should think. And then they go out in the world and they regurgitate that same information to other people without having a free thought for themselves. On top of that, you also have people that are very immature in their lives. You have people that, just look at the past generations. By the time they were in their teens or 20s, they were already doing big things with their lives, having families, having careers, going off to the military, fighting in wars, all kinds of things that really grew them up very fast. And that's not always a good thing because it robs them of their childhood and their innocence, but they were much more mature at a very younger age. Today, you have adults that are living home at 40 and 50, and they're still living with their parents, and their parents have been taking care of them their entire lives and are still taking care of them today. That's an immature person. You have people who are grown adults and they have a wife and kids, and they're playing video games on a Saturday afternoon when they should be taking care of things around the house or being with their children or helping their wife or just spending quality time with the family. Instead, they're playing video games on live streaming with someone else in another part of the world that they don't even know in person. But they're, doing that instead of doing what they should be doing as a grown adult, and so many other things that people are doing today that is very immature. So how could you expect a government to honestly give critical information and information that sometimes could be so big and so elaborate and so just unable to be comprehended by the average person that how could you expect them to give that information to a public that acts very immature? It's like when you're younger, your dad, typically how it would be throughout time, and for a son especially, he would guide that son through life. And as he got older, he would impart more and more wisdom on him as he saw fit for what he could handle at different stages in his life. And he would slowly but surely grow him up into a man and make him prepared, not just physically, but mentally, for how to handle the wicked ways of this world. But today, you don't have that rite of passage anymore. You don't have fathers doing that with their sons. Everything is about having fun and we don't want to give them too much stress and life's already scary and difficult, so let's make their home life always fun and everything's about happiness. And there's an element of that that's good, but there's also a part of it that is really detrimental to the upbringing of a person. And if you look at especially the boomer generation, they have coddled their children their entire lives, and it had a huge impact on their children from the Gen X generation to the Gen Z generation, a progressive increase in the coddling and in the childlike behavior of the children as they grew up into adulthood. You have some people from Gen X living home with their parents at an older age, but like in their late 20s, early 30s. But it got progressively worse when you went into the millennials living home into their 30s and 40s. And now Gen Z is on their path where some of them are, can't even conceive the idea of moving out on their own, living on their own. They plan on living with their parents as long as they possibly can, and they're very much dependent on their parents for everything. So it's gotten progressively worse as the generations went on coddling their children more and more. And now you have these young people today that really are very immature at an age that they shouldn't be. They're past 25, their brain is fully developed, and they are still acting like a 13-year-old child. And this is a phenomenon. This is an epidemic across not just the United States, but the world. And it's more than just a cultural thing. It's a generational thing. So you have a lot of people that are very immature today. And then they're at the same time, they're fighting for all of this deep, dark, secret information to be released to the public when it's almost impossible to do that to a generation that wouldn't be able to comprehend it and wouldn't be able to um, take that information in and absorb it appropriately, do whatever they have to do with it, compartmentalize it in their brain, whatever, handle it in a mature manner where you receive it, you understand it, and then you go to the government and say, okay, now that we know, what are we going to do about this? Who are we going to hold accountable? If it were that simple, maybe Trump would have done it already. Maybe their team would have done it, but there's probably a lot of fear of people overreacting and not being able to deal with this information. Because I think a lot of people understand and know what happened with that, with Jeffrey Epstein, and a lot of people are probably, hitting the nail on the head with he was running a sex trafficking organization that probably had high profile clients that maybe many of us would know personally by name, not personally in real life, but by name from them being celebrities or from them being well-known figures. So I just think there's a part of them not releasing it that has to do with the population, the society today, just not being ready to comprehend the depths of all that. The other part of it is most likely to not cover up, which I think a lot of people are saying that his administration is doing, but to deal with it in a delicate way because it does involve a lot of people. And don't forget, Jeffrey Epstein was a very clever guy who hung out in a lot of high profile social circles. And he came across probably thousands of people in his career that many of us would probably know of. And if their information has somehow gotten into the document, somehow gotten into the evidence, whether it was they handed him a business card and that got filed, or they gave him their phone number because, he said he wanted to take him out to dinner and, pitch him something with his business that had nothing to do with the trafficking. Their information is now part of the evidence. If you release all of that to the public, you're just going to see a bunch of people's information, not understand the context of what their affiliation was with him and his organization. And then the public and the media especially is going to abuse that information and go off and attack everyone that's in the evidence and ruin their lives. Even if they had absolutely nothing to do with him, might have even met him once in passing, being with someone else at a party that they got invited to or something, or a business event or anything. Even just being at Trump's Mar-a-Lago, the one or two times that Jeffrey Epstein was there. Maybe just them being in the room with him and having not even spoken to him got their name on the evidence list. We don't know. So I do understand why there's a hesitation from the Trump administration to hold back on this stuff. But I do also believe that it is coming out at some point. And I think he's just handling it in a delicate way because it definitely does involve a lot of moving parts. Now, there's also a third part that a lot of people saying that he was a Mossad agent, he was working for Israel, and he was basically his job was to get these high profile people involved in this illegal activity so that the country of Israel could use that to blackmail them, to get them to do what they wanted them to do and have leverage over them to influence politicians or maybe even the way that America governs or passes certain bills or whatever. So we don't really know. But yeah, there is an absolute possibility that's true. The problem is, and this goes back to the immaturity, is now you have a group of people saying that, well, that makes all the people of Israel bad people. They're all trying to control the world, and they're all involved in this evil sex trafficking stuff. You can't put a blanket generalization on a type of people because of a few that are part of that group that give it a bad name. Otherwise, you could do that with every single group of person in the world, and everybody's guilty, everybody's bad, everybody's wrong, and everybody deserves, the same punishment as the people who were actually involved in that thing. So we don't want to blanket and just accuse everybody of everything. And we don't want to do this thing where we blame a certain culture or a certain nation or something for all the problems of the world. Because there's bad people in every country, and there's, especially with politicians, in every single country. Israel, Iraq, Iran, China, Russia, even America. There are crooked politicians that want to control as much as they can. Maybe not the whole world, they're not Dr. Evil, but at the same time, they are trying to get as much power and control as they possibly can because that's the nature of evil. The Bible talks about how we don't wrestle with, this is a spiritual battle and we wrestle with powers and principalities and things like that, where people are um, inherently always, especially if they're living in sin and evil, and being controlled and influenced by evil, they're going to seek more and more power because it goes back to the devil, where the devil wishes he was God. And the devil would love to have the power that God has. So he can't have that. So he seeks it through God's people. And, in some way, I guess in the spiritual world, that gives him some level of power. Who knows? But that's sort of what the Bible explains it as. And the spiritual battles between good and evil fighting over that power. Now, good's not fighting for the power, they have it already. The evil is fighting to take it from them. And the good is fighting the evil to resist them from being able to accomplish that, I guess. I mean, that's sort of the idea behind it. But my point is, we don't want to get into the conspiracy to where I think a lot of people are waiting for Trump or somebody in his administration to come out and say, yes, we got all the bad guys. These are all them. It secretly was always all these people that you hate, and they're the bad guys, and we're going to get them, arrest them, put them in prison for life, or execute them on treason or whatever, and now they're going to go to hell for eternity, and great job. The bad guys lost and the good guys won. That's not the reality of life. And the arrogance of the average person to think that they are good and they are better than those people that are evil, that are committing those sins and crimes, is laughable. These are people that are committing sin in their own life in many different ways and probably many different sins, but they're pointing fingers at those other people and judging them. That's a hypocrite. Doesn't mean that the people who committed these crimes are not wrong, guilty, and should be punished to the full extent of the law. Absolutely. If they committed these crimes, especially if they involve children, they should get the maximum penalty of whatever that is, whether it be life in prison without parole or even the death penalty. If that's what it is, so be it. And then they will have to answer to God for the crimes that they committed in the afterlife. But I think a lot of people are just bloodthirsty and they're looking for vengeance on these people for the committing the crimes that they committed and also deceiving the people. But vengeance belongs to the Lord, as it says in the Bible. So don't seek vengeance, seek justice. There's a difference. The people out there that are seeking justice honestly, that's fine. Continue to do what you're doing. We need good people to fight for and stand up against the evil people out there. We need to stand up and put pressure on the government to do the right thing and punish these people for the crimes that they committed and expose them so that they're shamed by the public forever and their reputation and their names are ruined for all of eternity. We need that. Just don't let the conspiracy stuff get so much of a hold of you that you go from seeking justice to seeking vengeance, because that's a huge problem in itself. So with that said, I think that at some point more information will come out. And I would not be surprised if also Trump is holding on to this because it's leverage against certain people that he doesn't want to take down just yet because maybe he needs them to help him with some other things that he needs to get done. And then eventually bring this to the public to let the chips fall where they may, because Trump does have a tendency to do that in a way. And you can even look at it with Elon Musk, right? Trump's not the type of person that is beholden to anyone, especially even just because they helped him out or they helped him get elected or they helped him with certain stuff that he was trying to get passed or certain things that he's trying to accomplish in his administration. Look at Elon Musk. Elon went out and campaigned for him like a maniac this time around. He spent tons of his own money and helped him raise a lot of money to get elected this time. He was a huge force that really helped Trump clinch it in the end. He wasn't the only factor, but he was a big factor that helped Trump actually get the extra support he needed to win that election. Now, even with that, I mean, he had him in the White House how many times doing press conferences and letting Elon speak and run and continue to talk and talk and talk, bring his children around, all kinds of stuff that Trump doesn't really let anybody else do. And he let him run wild. But when it came time to pass the big beautiful bill, he did not care that it was going to affect Elon in a negative way. He was repealing the EV mandate and he was changing the way that the government is doing the whole energy efficient EV program going forward. And this created a huge wedge between Trump and Elon. And I've spoken about this in previous videos, but Trump didn't care because his main objective is to do, and I believe this, and I think many people believe it, but you can also see it. And talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. That really is a truth. His actions speak for themselves. Trump's main goal and objective, I believe, is to carry out the mission that God put him on, even if he doesn't know it, even if he doesn't know the mission. Just following his gut instinct will lead him there. But also doing the right thing by the American people to help set this nation back on a course of success and prosperity and freedom that it was on for a very long time, and help the people be led back to God to be a Christian nation once again. Now, will the people actually do it, and will America return and be restored to the way that it was in those aspects? Not everything. That's anyone's guess. Only God knows. And we'll see. But I think Trump, it's possible that he's waiting for some other factors to line up to where he wants them to before he puts that information out there. And even if he does, you might not get all of it. It might come out very slowly in drips over time so that the people can digest it and it just becomes so acceptable that eventually people are no longer freaking out and overreacting because it just becomes a little bit of a slow, gradual release to the public. So that's my take on where that might be going. And there's a lot more, but I want to try and watch a couple of clips just to see what some of the top people in the industries for media, politics, things like that have to say about this topic and their take on it, and then we'll do some more commentary and go from there.
President Trump has now responded through a surrogate, Bill O'Reilly, to the Jeffrey Epstein case whitewash cover-up firestorm, now in its fourth day, engulfing the internet and threatening the very future of MAGA. But finally, Trump has responded. We're about to break it down right now. Well, since Monday, we've been asking for it, and now we've gotten the answer from Bill O'Reilly, close confidant of President Trump. We know that it's bigger than just an Epstein list. There's the videos, there's the 14 terabytes that Trump's FBI raided back in March that the Democrats were hiding in New York at the FBI offices. So it's a red herring to say, oh, it's a client list. Obviously, it's a lot bigger than just a client list. They don't call it a client list. It's a whole spectrum of videos and notes and files that Epstein had in his intelligence agency blackmail operation. So we were simply saying, hey, you said this was there. It was reported this was there. And now you're saying it doesn't exist. That's what people got so upset. But going back to an interview over a year ago with Lex Friedman and Trump, he says, yeah, I'll release 9/11, I'll release JFK, I'll release MLK, I'll release it all. But I'm not sure about Epstein because that might implicate innocent people. Well, obviously, Epstein was involved with a whole bunch of people in business and everything else that weren't involved in molesting underage girls. So I had said in the last few days, that's probably what this is they just say a list of whoever knew Epstein. We don't release that publicly because they're not all guilty. Well, that makes sense. But you can't conflate that with the 14 terabytes that the AG, Pam Bondi, said shows a bunch of kids, hundreds of new victims being raped. So that's two separate issues. So clearly the way this has been presented to Trump is, hey, here's a list of all of Epstein's associates. A bunch of innocent people are in this. Should we release it? He goes, well, no, we shouldn't do that. They deserve due process. Well, everybody does. That is different than all the hard drives grabbed at Zorro Ranch and New Mexico and everything else in New York, Epstein Island, Little St. John's, all of it. So now we're getting answers on this. I'll show you the Bill O'Reilly clip. It just came out today. I'll show you the clip from last year with Lex Friedman. So Trump has had this limitedly brought to him and said, should we put all the names of these people that have due process and are innocent? He's like, well, no, a list of anybody he ever talked to on the phone shouldn't be. That makes sense. But all of the terabytes of child rape that Bondi says she has, that needs to be answered for. And I guess we got to have congressional hearings about that. But now we're understanding what's going on. And everybody, myself and others, have pointed at that original thing he said a year ago. And now this is a repeat, and I believe Bill O'Reilly. So now we've got some basic answers. We got to investigate from this ongoing. The investigation should stay open. This is not closed. Here's the clips.
I talked to President Trump man to man, eye to eye on St. Patrick's Day about this and the Kennedy files and the King files. It was all one conversation. And he said, and I agree, there are a lot of names associated with Epstein that had nothing to do with Epstein's conduct. They maybe had lunch with him or maybe had some correspondence for one thing or another. If that name gets out, those people are destroyed because there's not going to be any context. Media doesn't care about context. So you can't do that. You can't destroy human beings by putting out the files, whatever they may be.
But a lot of big people went to that island. But fortunately, I was not one of them.
It's just very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Probably will be, by the way. Probably.
So if you're able to, you'll be.
Yeah, I'd certainly take a look at it. Now, Kennedy's interesting because it's so many years ago. You know, they do that for danger too, because, you know, it endangers certain people, et cetera, et cetera. So Kennedy is very different from the Epstein thing. But yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
You were just telling me that you had a.
So if you've been following this from a while ago, Trump has said that on countless occasions that he would take a look at it, that he would probably release it and things like that. And, you know, I still think that he will, and I understand where he's coming from. There's a lot of insane people, like I said before, that there are probably people that are not tied to him that somehow ended up in the evidence, and you can't just go and let that out there. But I also think and believe that, and how he said, for safety reasons, you can't release certain things because you put those people's lives in jeopardy. And the truth is, you know, we have to get back to how we used to do things in the past was holding people accountable for things and using the public of shaming people as a form of punishment to some degree. So that's part of the reason why, like, when you have a public figure get arrested and their crimes get, you know, put out there, the court documents are always public record. This goes back to the Puritans, the colonial times in America, where in the 16 and 1700s, part of the punishment of people committing certain crimes or certain sins was the public shaming. Was if a person did something that was a sin or an actual crime, many different things would be done to shame them. Sometimes they would literally just have to stand in the town square with a sign that said their sin, their crime, and everybody would read it as they passed by and now know that person as having done that crime or committed that sin, and that person would forever be shamed in the community. Other things they would do is they would actually excommunicate them, especially earlier on when the communities were smaller. They would excommunicate them from the community because they didn't want that person's bad actions and bad behavior to spread through the community, because you're also not supposed to hang around bad company for too long, right? You should treat it like Jesus did. You go in, you try and help somebody who's done wrong things in life and, you know, preach the message of the gospel and his way. But if they don't want to receive it, it also says to shake the dust off your feet when you leave them. And that's because if they don't want to repent, if they don't feel that what they're doing is wrong or see it as a sin, you're supposed to let them suffer and move on, and God will judge them. You're not supposed to judge them. But you're also not supposed to spend too much time in their company because they can actually corrupt you. It could have an adverse effect. Instead of you trying to help them turn to Christ or God or, you know, whatever, just turn back to good, they can actually corrupt you, and now you become bad or evil or get into sin or whatever. And so we're not supposed to hang around bad company for too long. But that's what they would do back in the day, was publicly shame them or excommunicate them from the community. And it was a part of, you know, form of punishment. There's a story about I don't remember the person's name, but this was a person who, in their early 1600s, when might have been the mid 1600s, but when the Puritans were living in America, in the colonies that they were just starting, everybody was Christian at that time. And you would go to the church, and everybody in town was at the church, and you were all part of the same community, and you all, you know, had, you know, certain codes and ethics to live by, based on the Bible. And you could not you know, partake in sins because the rest of the people would find out about it and they would judge you, but in a righteous way, where they would, you know, make you admit your sin, you know, so you'd have to confess to it, and then they would, make sure that everybody was aware that that's what you were doing so that they would keep a careful eye on you and make sure you didn't infect the rest of the community. And then they would work with you to help you get away from that, set things right, go back to being a good contributing member of the society. And many people did. They were reformed and it was just a blip in their life. They made a mistake. They moved on. The community accepted them again and everything was fine. There were some people who just were rebels and they were infected by the evil spirit that they could not shake it. They, kept challenging the Christian beliefs. They kept challenging God. They kept challenging what the preachers were teaching in church. And they were slowly but surely becoming unbelievers and becoming, um, you know, pagans. And again, I don't know, remember the person's exact name, but it was a woman who was a member of the community. She was a member of the church. She was a Christian, as everybody pretty much had been at that time, and she was constantly doing things that were sinful, and she was also lying in a way where she would defend herself and her actions, constantly speak out against basically speaking back to the church and the men in the community. And, when they called her on what she was doing wrong and they tried to get her to repent, sometimes she would, but then eventually she'd go back to what she was doing wrong. And then it got to a point where she just didn't care. She was going to do what she wanted to do. And finally, they came to a conclusion and said, you have to be excommunicated from the community because you're going to bring upon curses to the community and you're also going to infect other people with the way that you think, that your beliefs that are antithetical to what we believe in Christianity. So they kicked her out of the community. She literally had to pack up her bags and leave and go off into wherever she went. Well, she eventually went to a colony that wasn't, Christians. They were just kind of doing their own thing. And over time, she went further and further away from God and away from the Christian church, and she eventually became a witch. She got into witchcraft, and she was one of the people that was eventually murdered, or not really murdered, executed because it was justified at that time during the Salem witch trials. She was one of the few people that was actually killed during that because she had become a witch, she had become evil, and she had, ended up getting the penalty of death because she refused to give up her sinful ways. And, the Christians of that time believed that she had gone to hell because of what she had become. And that if they didn't excommunicate her, because at one point I think they had a trial for her and they let her back into the community, but then she did it again and they said, we can't do this anymore because she's not going to stop. Things aren't going to change. And they were right to do that. And they realized if they didn't excommunicate her when they did, eventually she might have corrupted their community with witchcraft. But they got her out of the community before she did. And she ended up infecting another community that she went to that wasn't Christians. And she converted a lot of them, got them into witchcraft and they, some of them ended up getting into a lot of trouble or ended up dying from that stuff. So there is an element of this that we have to bring back, and I'm not talking about the witchcraft trials. I'm talking about the shaming of people for committing sins and unrighteousnesses and also breaking the law. But not just breaking the law, because we have the law to handle that. People who actually are charged with crimes, the law will take care of them. People who are charged with, or not charged rather, but commit immoral acts, and obviously anything with a minor is a criminal act, but immoral acts or just bad behavior in life, just being bad people that are not good members of society, we need to go back to shaming them publicly and making it clear to everybody that this is who they are, expose them, because that does play a role. It actually does, it can help certain people get back on the straight and narrow path because the pressure of public pressure from their peers of being shamed can be so great sometimes, it can be worse than a prison sentence. So there's an element of that we should bring back because it does work in a way, but it's not going to work for everybody. And if these people are committing crimes, then absolutely they need to be, arrested, tried, if found guilty, convicted, and do whatever the maximum penalty is. So let's take a look at another video from a well-known media person, Patrick David, who was on Fox News talking about this, and he's another big influential voice in, the podcast community, I guess you could say, but also, um, in politics right now. And he has a lot of good takes on stuff. If you ever get a chance to watch his show, PBD Podcast, I like what he does. I like what his team does. He has a lot of great takes and opinions on things. And we're going to take a look here to see what he had to say about the situation.
Founder Patrick Bet David is here. All right, PBD, what did you think when Trump said, nah, Epstein's old news?
You talking about Epstein?
Yeah.
I think good to be back on with you, buddy. But this is what I will tell you. The number one trending hashtag right now on X is Epstein. 2 million people have tweeted with the topic of Epstein. Number two is Nicki Minaj at 100,000. Comey's at 42,500. There is a reason why people are asking about this. This is by far, and I'm a supporter. 3 times I voted for this man. This is by far the biggest fumble of the administration they've had thus far. And here's the reason why. If you remember the president winning, he had a conversation with Fox News, the great Rachel Campos Duffy, and she asked, Mr. President, 9/11, yes. John F. Kennedy, yes. Epstein, he didn't say yes. He was a little bit hesitant of bringing that information out. Why? So why does his leadership team go out there and are like, we have this information and we're going to release this and cash? And let me tell you what we have with Pam Bondi out of the state of Florida. She knew everything about Bondi, about Epstein. Why are you fumbling this? Why are you not having an emergency meeting together to conversate and say, hey, we're going to be on the same page with messaging on this. All you have to do is send a message to everybody, say, God, let's have a conference call. Here's what we're going to be saying about this, because this was a very important issue to not 80% of the voters that voted for President Trump, but I think 20% of the voters wanted to know what's going to happen with Epstein, and it's a big letdown. I totally get the big victories. Tariff, $300 billion valuation this year of how much money is going to come from tariffs. Last year, the government only got 80 billion or so. That's like a company increasing their valuation by 4x. Massive victory. The stuff that's going on with, different areas we're winning. What happened with, Iran, the back and forth, the conversations. I think this was the biggest fumble when it came down to Epstein. And the more they answer like that, the more attention you're going to draw to. People are going to ask, why are they so nervous about this? What do you know that the rest of us don't know? If it's just the fact that you want to hold people blackmail, is that the relation between everything? Everyone's read the stories. It's not like we don't know what it is. It's not like the only thing people watch nowadays is Fox. People watch Twitter. People go X. People go CNN. People go ChatGPT. People know what happened with this guy. But my biggest suggestion, let's not have another fumble like the one we just had here, because this was the biggest fumble by the administration.
Well, let's get to one of the other hot stories. And I'm not talking about Nicki Minaj, although I am going to check out what's going on with Nicki after this break. We're talking about James Comey and Brennan, two of Obama's top intelligence guys, CIA, FBI, now under investigation, potentially lying to Congress, a conspiracy with regards to the Russia hoax. How does that play out?
Well, I mean, look, we all know who Comey is. This guy is a very, very dangerous man of what he did to America during the time going after the president, the amount of things that he did of dividing the country, and then you go put the 86. We already know what his profile is, and then just recently finding out what happened with Diddy, and his daughter was tied to it, and we followed that one. And then Brennan, you know where these guys are at. I love the fact that finally we're getting to the bottom of finding out what happened. A lot of people are interested to see what happened here. Their interference, but they're also interested in other issues. Jesse, you do a phenomenal job. You know we love you. The only suggestion I'm making to the administration, I'm not making any friends today. Normally when I come, I give a very positive message. My only suggestion, no more fumbles. You're having the greatest start ever as a president. There's going to be Nobel Prize, but a lot more than that. I believe he has a shot at going down as one of the greatest presidents of all time and competing for some of the top 5 type of lists. But we have to have an emergency meeting and saying collectively, no more fumbles. We got to go.
All right. We're going to go check in with Nicki Minaj in the break. PBD, good to talk to you as always.
She's waiting for you.
All right. Click here.
All right, so that was a good interview. One thing I caught, not sure if many people caught it, but Patrick said that, not everybody watches Fox News. And I think in that moment, he kind of realized what he said. It almost came off as like a dig against Fox News. And rule of thumb is you don't do that on the show of the person that, the company that you're on, because they want the audience to believe that everybody watches their channel because that's their audience. They're speaking to them and they want them to think everybody's watching what you're watching, so keep watching. So I think there was a little bit there where he kind of realized, "Oh, I should have said CNN or somebody else that's a competing company." But that's just a little inside thing about that. Uh, the bigger thing is what Jesse said, after the whole Epstein stuff, that Brennan and Comey are being investigated for what they did. That to me is the bigger story because Brennan and Comey are two of the worst, most evil people who were in government in the Obama administration and who really had a negative impact on this nation. I think everybody probably kind of knows that Brennan is a war hawk and Comey was just such a corrupt guy, FBI director, involved in a lot of bad things. During a really, really dark time for the FBI in this country and the abuses that they did to the American people. And then eventually that whole 86 thing came out when Comey posted that. I think those guys are a big threat to the Trump administration, along with other people. But, these people specifically because they were mentioned. But they're also very dangerous people. They're very dangerous people that the Trump administration has to be careful as they're going through that because my hope, and I think many people's hope, is that they will, get enough evidence because they already know what really went on, but get enough evidence to finally get those people and try them for the crimes that they had committed over the course of their careers. And that's hard when you're doing that to people who are in such high positions of power, but also people who are in the law enforcement game. You're going to have a split audience on that. You're going to have half the people that are not going to want to see that person get in trouble because, number one, they respect them for the career that they had. And number two, they might feel, crap, if these people can get in trouble for what they did, I'm definitely getting in trouble for what I did because I'm at a lower level than them. And I was also doing crooked things. But I think, and we will see, time will tell, I think that that is probably going to be the bigger thing that happens in the Trump administration. And if I had to guess, I would say that they're probably going to be the beginning of the snowball of crooked politicians and crooked people in government actually beginning to face the consequences of their actions. Now, do they get, charged, tried, and convicted and actually thrown in prison for what they've done? I don't know. Time will tell. But something tells me that it begins with them, with these two guys, and they're going to be the beginning of the snowball. They're going to be the ones that start a snowball effect of finally bringing these people in government who were doing corrupt things for the last 20, 30 years to justice. And once they're charged for their crimes, it's going to roll into a huge snowball of many different people in government going down for the crimes that they committed and many of which were probably tied to these guys. But even if they're not, it'll be a repercussion of this whole process as it unfolds. And then it'll also make the other people in government realize, you know what? We took down these two big guys and they were really hard to get and actually get put through the process because they have such power and such ties into the deep state. If we could get them, we could get pretty much anyone. Now, does this mean you're going to see former presidents or former secretaries of state or vice presidents or whatever, all go down for their crimes? No. And there are going to be some people that are going to be protected. There are going to be some people that just will never do time for their crimes because not that they're untouchable, but it would just be too big of an upset for the American people to accept. Now, that said, it doesn't mean that they don't get punished for their crimes. This is where faith comes into play because there are a lot of people out there that don't have faith and are just, like I said, seeking vengeance because they only see judgment and punishment as something that happens in this world. And they feel if this person dies without getting that, we'll never have gotten justice as a people. That's not true. These people committed crimes, but they also committed sins against God and against their fellow man. God, the ultimate judge, will judge them in the afterlife. And he's already doing it now in this life. But don't seek vengeance. That belongs to the Lord. Seek justice. And if justice doesn't come in this life to those people, you can be rest assured it will come in the afterlife when they meet the ultimate judge. So don't worry about it. Just go on living your life. It's none of your concern. Doesn't mean you give up. You just sit back. Yes, get up every day, fight for what you believe in, and to continue to uphold our rights and freedoms in this country. But not everybody's going to be brought to justice in this life, and you have to be okay with that. It's part of the process of life. But I do think that some people, actually many, are probably going to start to go down for the crimes that they committed in government and, over the course of the last 30 years. And you're probably going to see a lot of stuff that get exposed with that process because a lot of things are going to be opened up, a lot of files, a lot of doors, a lot of moving parts. And it's already begun behind the scenes with some stuff. But these two seem like they're going to be the beginning of a wave of crooked people in government finally going down for the crimes that they committed. Now, whatever that looks like, I don't know. Time will tell. But that's my assessment of the situation. And to me, that's more important than the Epstein thing. The Epstein thing is bad, especially if it involves children. And those people should pay for their crimes, no doubt. But like I said, they'll be judged in the afterlife by the judge anyway, so don't worry about it. The more important thing is those victims getting the justice they deserve, but also getting the help they deserve to get back to a sense and a state being where they can live a decent life post all of that traumatic stuff happening to them. And those are really who we should focus on. Shift your focus from vengeance to the bad guys and all that stuff, and shift it to the victims who were actually involved in this, getting them justice, but also getting them the help that they need to be able to cope with life now and finding a way to safeguard against this type of thing ever happening again. And it starts with turning back to God. If this were a fully Christian nation, this would never ever happen. This type of stuff wouldn't happen in a Christian nation, not just because the people are mostly all going to be in alignment with the same morals and values, but also because they will be blessed by God. And this type of behavior does not come from God. So his people wouldn't involve themselves in it. But I guess that's the main takeaway for today is, turn back to God, turn back to faith. Don't seek vengeance, seek justice, and be okay with everything not going the way you want it to because it's not your plan. It's not about you. It's God's plan. Just do what you can to be a light in this world and to help restore this nation to a nation of freedom and all of the things that God had designed it to be. Learn to accept the things that you can't control. I agree with what Patrick had to say, and it was a fumble. It was, and I don't even think it was a fumble. I think it is the way that they're handling it is not great because they know they want to release it. They know that the public is demanding it, and Trump's core voter base demands it. But they also are torn as to whether or not they should and whether or not they can right now. So, but again, I still think that that stuff is going to come out. It's just going to take time. So we'll see what the future holds. And if none of this ends up becoming true, then, that's my take. I was wrong. And what are you going to do? But I have a feeling that most, if not all, of what I'm saying today will eventually become a reality, but we'll see. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, share, all that stuff. And I only say it because it's a good reminder. I even am guilty of this too, where I'll watch a video of even somebody I follow, subscribe to, and like, and I'll forget, you know, like the video. It does help them continue to grow their channel. And if you want to see more of their content, you got to support their content in order to continue to see them make new content. Same thing for this channel. I have a lot of big plans for it. Hope you stick around to see them and are a part of that. And, really love your engagement. We get in the comments. You could agree, you could disagree, whatever you want. This is a pretty open, channel. You can say mostly what you want as long as it's not, like I said, you know, uh, bullying or inappropriate or things like that. If you disagree with me on every single thing I say, that's perfectly fine. It's welcome here. But definitely engage, put in the comments topics that you want me to, maybe do for future videos. And then also looking to do guests pretty soon. If you have any guests that you think would be good for the channel or people that you'd like to see interviewed, put them in the comments or DM me if you want to keep it discreet. And I will definitely look into them. But that's it for this video. Don't forget to stay for the ad at the end. Take a look at some of the stuff that we got going on now. A lot of stuff's on sale, so it's a great time to purchase some things if that's what you need. We have the book That's at a great discount right now. My children's book, the apparel shop, a percentage of those sales go to charity, and the Amazon storefront, which we have a lot of products on there that we support, that we personally use, and that we recommend. So take a look at all that stuff. But that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the next one. All right, everybody, I just want to take a moment to promote my children's book. This is Little Boy Full of Love. That's me on the back. And this is a little sneak peek on the inside. It's a great book. It's a children's book. I actually wrote this for my son. And it's available right now on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, Bookshop.org, and a lot of other online platforms. But more importantly to me, it's actually available in a lot of bookstores throughout the country. You can find out which ones are closest to you on my Instagram page. You know, we highly recommend that you shop local, buy from a local bookstore. So if you are looking to, you know, get a children's book for you or anybody you know, or even with the holidays coming up, it's a great time to, you know, buy a children's book as a gift. You know, definitely get it from a bookstore that's local to you. But if you absolutely can't get it from one of the bookstores that are currently carrying it right now, and we're in about 15 or 16 different states across the country, so it may actually be in your state, and it could even be local to you. But if you can't get it from the physical bookstore, check out our Amazon storefront. The book's available on there right now. And like I said, with the holidays coming up, you may want to do your Christmas or Hanukkah or holiday shopping early, and you can even order it from our Amazon storefront and ship it directly to whoever you're gifting it to. But it's available on those platforms, Amazon storefront and bookstores and other websites that I mentioned. But I want to take a moment here to look at the storefront just to give you an idea of some other stuff that we have available on there. These are products that we highly recommend. They are things that we use in our daily lives, and it's all organized by category. So it's a lot easier to, you know, shop for the holidays and specifically for things that interest you, particular categories. Available right now, many different items on our storefront. If you can see here, 61 items just in women's apparel, fall decor, because right now we're in fall, 26 items, kitchen items, you know, baking specifically, things for around the house, children's toys, even stuff for parties. If you're trying to save money on a party and throw in your own, you know, occasion, you can even buy some cool gadgets here to help you, you know, put on a better party. You know, health and wellness items here, even stuff for Christmas. And there's the book right there. So you can get it from the storefront. You can get it from the bookstores, like I mentioned. But it's available on all these different platforms. It's really easy to find and gift to somebody. Also, I want to show you the apparel shop, and these are some clothing items that we actually produced. So if you're looking to get some cool apparel items, you know, shirts, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, leggings, even accessories, cell phone cases, women's makeup bags, fanny packs, coffee mugs, all different types of stuff, even some, you know, art, all different categories here, apparel, homeware, accessories, drinks, even digital items. It's all on this store, healthybodygoodssoul.com. Anything that pertains to you or somebody that you're looking to get a gift for the holidays. A lot of great designs on here, a lot of cool designs that we actually custom created. Stainless steel water bottles, especially now with the fall and winter. A lot of cool hoodies and long sleeve shirts. This is a really cool one, I think, for women. The original Be Your Soul apparel, that one's actually really popular. People tend to like that. This one's one of my favorites. The free shirt. It's the American flag and it says free and that says not property of the United States government. That one's pretty cool. Got all different types of tank tops, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, tote bags, coffee mugs, even some items for kids, backpacks. So if you're the type that likes to, you know, plan ahead, I would definitely recommend ordering from the Amazon storefront or the apparel shop. within the next couple of weeks to get everything in time for the holidays. Use code SAVE15 on the apparel shop to save 15% off everything on the storefront. So order within the next week or two, and you'll definitely have everything in time for the holidays. Definitely check out all the links to everything, the Amazon storefront, the book, and the apparel shop in my bio on all my platforms, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. But you can also find them in all the show notes for every episode that I post, and get all your orders in time for the holidays. All right, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It helps the channel continue to grow. And put in the comments things that you would like me to talk about and make videos on for the future, and I will definitely do my best to do that. Stay tuned for the next one.